I still drive Annie's Road at night, but there is one shift I do not talk about on the radio. It was a weekday, off-season, almost no one riding that late. The kind of night when the fog hugs the road and the streetlights look tired. I remember the hum of the bus, the rattling windows, and that empty feeling you get on the last round. I had done that stretch so many times that my hands could steer it half asleep. Every pothole, every bend, especially the long curve where the guardrail is scarred and dented. People call it Annie's Curve. They tell stories about accidents, about lights in the woods, about things that step out into the road. I never worried about ghosts. I worried about drunks, kids playing chicken, people who want to get on the bus for reasons that have nothing to do with going home. That night, the bus was empty after the mall stop. Just me, the engine, and the faint smell of rain through the cracked side window. I checked the mirror. No one. Row after row of worn seats, blue fabric lit by the weak fluorescent bars above. I passed the last gas station. Its sign was half lit, buzzing, the clerk already dragging trash bags to the curb. Then the road narrowed. Trees climbed in on both sides, and the houses thinned out. The only light came from my own headlights and the distant glow of a single porch across a field. As I approached Annie's Curve, my chest tightened the way it always does there. You slow down, watch for deer, watch for people. The radio cracked with static and then went silent. I eased into the curve. The guardrail flashed pale in the beams, dented metal and old skid marks. When I came out of the bend, I checked the mirror again, just a habit. There was someone sitting in the last row. I felt it before I understood it. You know when the air changes in the bus, when another body is there, even if you did not hear them step on. My foot almost slipped from the pedal. I blinked hard. Last row, right side, by the window. A shape leaning slightly toward the aisle. I had not stopped for anyone. No doors opened, no beep from the card reader, no footsteps on the stairs. My first thought was simple and human. I had missed them. Maybe they had been on since the mall, and I just forgot. I told myself that, even as my hands started to sweat on the wheel. I cleared my throat, kept my eyes mostly on the road, and looked at the mirror again. The passenger wore a hood, dark, face turned toward the window. No movement, no phone glow. I tapped the brakes lightly, as if slowing down would slow the feeling crawling up my spine. I ran through the mental list of stops. Who could they be waiting for? There were only a few stops left on that direction. A couple of side streets, then the park and ride. I told myself I would see their face when they stood up to get off. That would make it feel normal again. But every time I checked the mirror, the figure was in the exact same position. Head against the window, hands hidden in the sleeves, body angled slightly toward the aisle, as if listening. The road opened up near the old cemetery. I could have pulled over, called it in, asked for patrol to meet me at the park and ride. Instead, I kept driving. There is a strange pride that comes with night shifts. You tell yourself you can handle it. You do not make a fuss. I made the next stop. No one at the shelter. The headlights washed over the empty bench. The doors hissed open. Cool air slid in. No movement behind me. I waited anyway, eyes on the mirror, pretending to check my watch. The figure did not move. The doors closed with a soft thump. The bus lurched forward. My heartbeat was in my throat now. I could hear it over the engine. I decided to use the camera feed. We have a little screen near the wheel, split views of the aisle and rear door. I glanced down. Rows of seats, handrails, the dirty floor. The last row was empty. I stared at the screen, then at the mirror, back and forth, like I had forgotten how reflection works. Mirror, figure by the window, still and patient. Camera, nothing there, only battered fabric. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of light, some angle that turned a seat into a person. I lifted my eyes from the screen and looked straight into the mirror, forcing myself to hold the image. The hooded head slowly turned toward the aisle, toward the front of the bus, toward me. I did not see a face, just a darker shape under the hood, like a hole where features should be. My throat closed, the steering wheel shook in my hands. I snapped my gaze back to the road just in time to correct the drift. Tires hissed near the shoulder. The bus swayed. I took a long breath and told myself something very simple. If there is a person back there, I will talk to them. If there is no person, then I need to know that too. The next stop was the last before the long empty stretch. A lonely sign, no bench, just gravel and weeds. I pulled in harder than usual, brakes sighing deep. The engine settled into a low growl. The doors opened. Night air swept in, bringing the smell of wet dirt and cold metal. I unbuckled my belt, stood up, hands slightly trembling, and stepped into the aisle. From the front, the bus looked hollow. I walked slowly, trying not to think about how the overhead lights hummed, how each step echoed too loudly on the rubber floor. Rows blurred past, middle seats, back seats, no one. When I reached the last row, the seat by the window was empty. The fabric was damp, as if someone had been sitting there in wet clothes. My fingers hovered over the seat back. The air felt colder around it, like a draft coming from nowhere. I stood there, breathing too fast, listening. Outside, the road was silent. No cars, no wind, no crickets. That was when I heard the soft hiss behind me, near the open doors. A breath that was not mine. I froze in the last row, hands hovering over the damp fabric, trying to tell myself it was just the night air slipping in. But the breath behind me was slow, steady, close. I turned my head just enough to see the aisle. Nothing. Only the pale lights, the empty rails, the faint drift of cold air from the open doors. I waited for footsteps, a shuffle, anything. Instead, something else happened. A shape slipped across the mirror at the front of the bus. Not in the aisle, not in the camera feed, only in the reflection. A hooded figure leaning from behind the last row, exactly where I was standing, but I was alone. My stomach knotted. I backed away from the seat, eyes fixed on the mirror. The reflection moved when I moved, but a half beat late, like it was thinking about whether to follow. I reached the front, sat down hard, and grabbed the wheel. I did not even buckle up. I just hit the closed door switch. The doors shuddered shut. The bus lurched forward, tires grinding gravel, as I pulled away from the stop. I kept checking the mirror, waiting for the figure to reappear, but the rows stayed empty, nothing but the stillness of fluorescent light. For a moment I thought I imagined everything, until I smelled it. Damp fabric, cold metal, a faint scent of mud and wet leaves, as if someone had brought the woods inside. I drove faster than I should have. Annie's road is narrow, curves like it wants to throw you into the trees. But I pushed through each bend, hands tight on the wheel, breath shallow. The radio crackled again, static, whining, then a soft voice bleeding through. At first I thought it was dispatch, but the tone was wrong. Too calm, too close, as if someone was whispering from the back row. A single word stretched through the static, drawn out, barely human. Stop. I nearly swerved into the opposite lane. The voice faded. The radio went dead again. I reached the park and ride with my heart clawing at my ribs. Big, empty lot. just a few lampposts buzzing overhead. The kind of place where shadows feel heavier than they should. I killed the engine and stood up again, telling myself I had to do one last walk, protocol, safety check, but really, I needed to see the seats empty with my own eyes before I stepped off the bus. The aisle looked longer than before. I walked slowly, trying not to think about the damp smell, the cold patches in the air, the mirror that had shown more than it should. Halfway down, I heard the sound, a soft thump from the very back, not a footstep, more like someone tapping the floor with the heel of a hand, waiting, testing. I swallowed, forced myself to keep moving. Each step was its own little battle. When I reached the last row, the seat looked empty again. But the fabric was even wetter than before, as if someone had just stood up. I reached out one hand, barely touching it. Cold, too cold. A sudden knock hit the rear door behind me, hard enough to rattle the frame. I spun so fast, I lost my balance. The glass stared back at me, black, reflecting nothing but my own trembling outline. No one outside, just the emptiness of the lot. But on the glass, right at eye level, was a smear. Mud, dragged in a single slow streak, as if someone had pressed their palm there and slid it down in silence. I left the door locked, walked straight back to the front, and sat down to request assistance. My fingers hovered over the radio switch. I took a breath, pressed it. The line opened with a crackle, and the same whisper slid through the speaker, calm, patient, as if sitting only an arm's length away. "Driver, you passed my stop." I dropped the radio. It swung by its cord, bumping the dash, static hissing. I looked at the mirror. The last row was no longer empty. A hooded shape sat there, leaning forward, face turned toward me, hands resting on its knees as if ready to stand. There was no camera glitch this time, no trick of light, no moment where I could pretend I imagined it. I stared at the figure, frozen, waiting for it to move. Instead, the bus door behind me hissed open, even though I had not touched the switch. Cold night air flooded in, and something stepped onto the bus. The first footstep on the stairs was so soft, I thought I imagined it. Then came another, slow, measured, like whoever was boarding was in no rush at all. I kept my eyes on the mirror. The hooded figure in the last row sat motionless, but the sound of those steps felt too close, as if they were right next to my seat instead of at the front door. A man appeared at the top of the stairs, just a man. He wore a dark jacket with the hood pulled up, jeans streaked with mud, shoes wet enough to squeak against the rubber floor. His face was pale, breath coming in clouds from the cold, eyes a little too wide for someone just catching a bus. He did not tap a card, did not ask about the fare. He just stood there, watching me, as if trying to decide whether I was real. "You passed me," he said. His voice sounded exactly like the whisper that had crawled through the radio. I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "I did not see you," I managed. "Where were you waiting?" He turned his head slightly, looking down the empty aisle, then back at me. "On the curve," he said. "By the rail. Annie's curve. There are no official stops there. No lighting, no shelter, nothing but bad memories and skid marks. You should not wait there," I said, because it was all I could think to say. He smiled. It was thin, brittle, as if he had forgotten how to do it. "People always say that," he replied. "They still drive by." He moved past me without another word, walking down the aisle with the dragging, damp sound of wet fabric on old plastic. I watched him in the mirror. Every step he took brought him closer to the last row where the other hooded shape still sat motionless. Except now, the last row was empty. The seat that had been occupied for most of the route was just worn fabric again. No shadow, no figure, nothing but a faint, darker patch where the dampness clung. The man chose the middle of the bus instead, dropped into a seat without looking back. "Where are you headed?" I asked, still trying to keep my voice level. He shrugged, eyes drifting to the window, to the dark parking lot beyond. "Just do not miss it this time," he said. I did not argue. I closed the door, started the engine, and pulled out of the park and ride. We should have been done for the night. That had been the last stop, but my route, my sense of order, felt ruined. So I did something I had never done before. I decided to go back, call it guilt, call it curiosity, call it trying to prove to myself that the world still followed rules. I radioed dispatch, said I was running a final safety sweep on the road. My voice must have sounded strange, because they asked if I was all right. "Just tired," I told them. The man in the middle seat let out a soft laugh at that, barely audible over the engine. We rolled back onto Annie's Road. The lamps seemed dimmer, the trees closer, the air thicker. As we approached the curve, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest return, only sharper now, needling. I checked the mirror. The man was watching me, leaning into the aisle, hood still up, eyes catching the reflection of the dashboard lights. "Here," he said quietly, "this is where you left me." There was no stop sign, no shelter, just the scarred guardrail and the dark slope beyond. I slowed the bus. The curve forced me to. On the side of the road, tucked just behind the bend, stood another figure, hood up, hands at their sides, facing the guardrail instead of the road, as if listening to something below. I could not tell if it was a man or a woman, young or old. The shape was just there, still as stone. "Do you see them?" I asked, voice dry. The passenger in the middle seat tilted his head. "Do you?" he answered. The bus drifted closer. For a moment, the headlights cut across the standing figure and the rail, and I saw what lay below the drop. A car, crunched against a tree, hood folded like paper, front end buried in the brush. Its hazard lights flashed weakly, orange and slow, like a heartbeat struggling to go on. My hands tightened on the wheel. I hit the brake and grabbed the radio, called it in, voice shaking so much I had to repeat the location twice. Dispatch told me patrol was already en route. Someone had reported a crash. "Did you see anyone outside the vehicle?" they asked. I looked again. The figure by the guardrail was gone. Just empty rail, wet pavement, and the broken line of skid marks. I checked the mirror. The man in the middle seat was sitting very still, head bowed, hands folded together. "Stay on the bus," I told him. He did not answer. I stepped down, cold air hitting me like a wall. The smell of antifreeze and wet soil rose from the ditch. When I reached the guardrail, I saw another smear on the metal. Mud, mixed with something darker. I leaned over, craning my neck to see the car better without scrambling down the slope. The driver's side door was crumpled inward. The windshield starred with impact. Inside, in the washed-out beam of my bus headlights, I could make out a shape slumped over the wheel, a hood pulled up over their head. I backed away, heart hammering, telling myself not to jump to any conclusions, not to connect things that might not belong together. But when I climbed back into the bus, the passenger was no longer in the middle seat. The damp mark on the cushion was still there. I walked the aisle once, then twice, empty. No sound but the cooling tick of the engine and the distant wail of sirens growing closer on the road. The rear door was locked. The front had never opened, yet there were fresh, wet footprints on the floor, leading toward the very back row, fading out halfway there as if they had never been made at all. Later, after statements and paperwork and a long ride home, I watched the security footage with the supervisor. We sat in a small office, screen flickering, angle fixed on the aisle of my bus. We watched the entire trip. The rows stayed empty. From the mall to the park and ride, to the pass back down Annie's Road, there was no one behind me. No hooded passenger, no man in a damp jacket. No one entering, no one leaving. At one point in the recording, halfway through the route, I saw myself stand up and walk down the aisle, stopping at the last row. I watched my own hand hover over empty fabric, my head turning as if listening to something that did not exist, in the reflection of the front mirror. Just for a second, the distortion of the camera created a blur behind my shoulder. My supervisor rewound it, played it again, paused on the frame. Light artifact, he said. Long shift, he added. Fatigue does strange things. He wrote it off as stress. They all did. The driver in the crashed car survived, barely. I heard later that they had been speeding, headlights off, coming around Annie's curve like they were chasing a bus they could not quite catch. They said they did not remember anything, only that they had been on the road for hours trying to get home. Now, every night I take that route, I slow for the curve. I check the mirror, and some nights, when the fog is low and the guardrail gleams like a blade in the headlights, I catch a glimpse of a hooded figure in the last row, sitting very still, just listening. Maybe it is guilt. Maybe it is my mind filling in the dark. But I never drive Annie's Road empty anymore. There is always a feeling, heavy and quiet, that someone is with me, waiting for a stop that does not exist on any map. The second story starts the same way the first one ended. Late shift, empty bus, that stretch of Annie's Road that feels too quiet for a place so close to town. I had heard rumors from other drivers, but this one came from a coworker who rarely talked about anything at all. A man who kept to himself, signed his logs neatly, and never exaggerated. He told me this story once, eyes fixed on the coffee machine, as if afraid someone else might hear. He said the night was colder than usual. Fog pressing down, headlights carving tunnels through it, the kind of air that makes the bus feel heavier, like it is dragging something behind it. He had only one passenger left, a woman in a light coat, sitting near the middle, typing quietly on her phone, harmless.com. The kind of presence that makes a shift easier. They were approaching Annie's curve. The guardrail flashed, glinted, then vanished behind the fog again. That was when he saw the man, standing on the yellow line right in the bend, facing the bus, motionless, no jacket, no bag, just a shirt that clung to him as if he had been in the rain for a long time. The driver braked hard. The woman grabbed the seat in front of her, eyes wide, but the man in the road did not flinch, did not raise his hands, did not step aside. The bus screeched to a stop, so close that the driver swore he could have reached out and touched the figure. He turned on the hazards, heart beating wild, and opened the door a crack. "You all right?" he called out. "Are you hurt?" The man finally moved. He lifted his head slowly, as if it took effort just to do that. The driver saw no injuries at first, but his face, something about it felt wrong. Not deformed, not bleeding, just blank, like an expression half-formed, waiting for someone else to fill it in. The woman behind him whispered, "Please do not let him on." He nodded, kept his foot on the brake, and tried again. "Sir, do you need help?" The man tilted his head. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The fog thickened around him, curling like smoke at his feet. The driver felt a cold pressure in his ears, as if someone had pressed hands against both sides of his head. He said it was the quietest moment of his life. Too quiet, so quiet it felt wrong. The man finally spoke. "You left me," he said, voice flat, as if repeating something he had heard from someone else. The driver frowned. "I have never seen you before." The man blinked once, slowly. "You left me," he said again. Same tone, same cadence, as if he did not understand the words, but felt the weight of them. The woman began to cry softly. The driver closed the door, fully, heart pounding. He reached for the radio, but the static swallowed everything he said. Outside, the man lifted one hand and placed it against the windshield, flat, palm forward. A wet imprint formed there, dark and smeared, running downward, like the shape of a soaked hand dragging itself down the glass. The driver told the woman to stay seated as he shifted into reverse, trying to pull back without hitting anything. The man's palm pressed harder, the glass vibrating under the pressure, and then he stepped forward, right through the fog, right through the beam of the headlights. So close, the driver could see the water dripping from the hem of his shirt. "Drive," the woman whispered. "Please, drive." The man lowered his hand, turned slightly, and pointed toward the slope behind the guardrail, a slow, trembling gesture, not threatening, more like someone showing the way. The driver followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing but darkness and fog. Then he saw the lights, a faint glow, flashing in a broken rhythm, buried deep in the brush. Hazards, a car. One that had not been there earlier. Without thinking, the driver threw the bus in park, unbuckled, and stepped out. The woman stayed behind, hands over her mouth. Cold hit him like a wall the moment he touched the pavement. He moved toward the guardrail, heart sinking with every step. The car was crumpled at the front, steam rising from the hood, the windshield shattered inward. He climbed down the slope and saw the driver slumped over the wheel, blood mixing with rainwater on the dashboard. Alive, barely. He ran back to call for help. When the paramedics arrived and dragged the injured man out, the bus driver scanned the road, searching for the soaked figure who had pointed him there. No footprints on the pavement, no damp trail, no sign of anyone having stood in the road. The woman on the bus said she never saw the man again after the windshield smear. Dispatch later reviewed the footage. Only the bus stopped in the curve. No man in the road. Nothing blocking the lane. Nothing pointing toward the woods. Except one thing. On the inside of the windshield, exactly where the smear had been, was a dried streak of brownish mud, and something darker threaded through it. The cleaner had to scrub it off for nearly an hour. To this day, that driver refuses to take Annie's Road after sunset, because sometimes, he said, you do not get to choose what waits for you in the fog. I had finished my shift hours earlier, punched out, locked my locker, walked across the empty lot toward my old sedan with that numb heaviness that comes after too many late nights. I kept telling myself I would stop taking Annie's Road home, but habits cling tight and shortcuts cling tighter. The night was warm, strange for that season, with a thin haze settling over the asphalt. Streetlights flickered in that tired way that makes you feel watched. I got into my car, started the engine, and let the radio murmur low. The depot behind me was still, rows of buses lined neatly in their places, windows dark, bodies cooling after hours of hard work. I pulled out slowly, passing the chain-link fence, scanning the parked buses out of old habit. That was when I noticed one of them, a single bus with its interior lights still on, casting a faint yellow glow against the black windows. Nothing unusual at first. Sometimes maintenance came late. Sometimes drivers forgot to switch things off, but the headlights turned on bright and sudden, cutting straight across the lot. I stopped my car, foot resting on the brake. The bus did not move. It simply idled there, its engine humming too quietly, as if waiting. I checked the schedule board in my head. No departures at that hour. No night routes left. No reason for any bus to be waking up. I shook it off, eased forward, and pulled onto the street. When I reached the first intersection, I glanced in the mirror. The bus had left the depot. It was turning onto the same street, keeping a steady distance behind me. I laughed once, a dry, uncomfortable sound. Coincidence, I told myself. Someone else must have forgotten something. Someone else must be heading back out. But when I turned right, the bus turned right. When I slowed for a yellow light, the bus slowed with me. Not tailgating, not distant, just matching. Every movement a quiet echo of mine. I reached the bend before Annie's Road and decided to test it. I signaled left, but turned right sharply, cutting into a side street lined with dark houses and sleeping lawns. The bus followed, turning without hesitation, without slowing, the interior still glowing like a lantern carried through a graveyard. Something cold settled in my chest, the kind of cold that makes your fingers tighten on the wheel and your breath grows shallow. The neighborhood was empty, not a single porch light on. No cars parked on the street, only my sedan and the bus behind me, rolling slow, quiet, sure. I took another turn, then another, then a long, looping circle through a cul-de-sac. Every time the bus followed, soft lights drifting behind me like a patient shadow. I reached the end of the loop, stopped completely, and waited. The bus stopped too, not close, not threatening, just there, idling, watching. The windows were too dark to see anyone inside. No driver's silhouette, no movement, only that faint yellow glow from deep within the cabin, as if the lights were running on memory. I put my car back in gear and took the one road I never wanted to drive at night again, Annie's Road. Trees gathered tight around me. The air grew heavier, the curves winded deeper. The world shrank to just my headlights and the hum of my engine fighting the silence. Halfway through the stretch, I checked the mirror. The bus was closer, too close. Its headlights washed the back of my car in blinding white. I sped up. The bus matched. I slowed down. The bus matched. Every breath burned now, each one shorter than the last. I hit the straightaway before the infamous curve and made a choice I should never have made. I pulled over, right onto the thin gravel shoulder, hazards clicking in steady panic. The bus drifted to a stop behind me, calm, quiet, as if I had given it permission. I got out of my car, slowly, legs trembling, palms sweating. The night smelled of wet leaves and something sharper, rust or damp metal, something wrong. The bus door did not open. The engine did not rev. It simply sat there, breathing warm exhaust into the cold air. I took a step toward it, then another. Halfway there, its interior lights shut off, dark as a dead phone screen. I stopped breathing. A moment later, the headlights blinked off to total darkness. Only the silhouette of the bus remained, a hulking black shape in the middle of the road. I backed away, hands shaking, eyes locked on its shadow. That was when I saw movement inside, not a figure, not a clear shape, just the faintest shift in the deeper darkness behind the glass, closer to the front door, then closer still. I ran, got back into my car, slammed the door, locked it, and fired the engine so hard I nearly flooded it. As I sped away, the bus behind me stayed dark, still, silent. But in the mirror, just before I rounded the next bend, I saw the interior lights flicker on again, soft yellow, steady, waiting. For the rest of the drive home, I checked the mirror every few seconds, expecting those headlights to reappear over the hill. They never did, but later that night, as I tried to sleep, a soft mechanical hum passed slowly down my street, steady and patient, as if searching for the right house. I did not look out the window. I kept still in the dark, listening to the fading engine until it finally slipped away. Some nights, it returns, never stopping, never honking, just passing by at a careful crawl, as if reminding me that I was the one who tried to outrun it. This one was told to me by a driver who quit the job only a week later. He said the story calmly, quietly, the way someone talks when they have already accepted they will not be believed. He was running the late route, same as always, taking Annie's Road after the last mall stop. He picked up a few passengers early on, college kids mostly, but by the time he reached the long stretch where the trees swallowed the sky, only one rider remained, a girl, young, maybe late teens, maybe early 20s. Hard to say. She wore a big coat and kept the hood half up. She chose the middle seat on the left side of the aisle, hands folded neatly on her lap, eyes staring forward without blinking much. He said she was polite, soft voice when she greeted him, quiet as a feather after that. Nothing strange, nothing unsettling, just the kind of silence that makes you nervous only because of how perfect it is. As they rolled deeper onto Annie's Road, fog drifted low between the trunks and the guardrail, flickered in and out like a warning. The driver checked the mirror. The girl sat exactly as before, still, straight-backed, eyes fixed on the empty seat across from her. He figured she was tired, maybe coming home from a late shift. He announced the next stops out of habit, but she did not move. When he reached the one she boarded from, she did not stand. He cleared his throat. "Miss, this is your stop." She did not answer. She only tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something distant, something he could not hear. He repeated himself, a little louder, still nothing. He put the bus in park, unbuckled, and stepped into the aisle. The overhead lights hummed in that cold, buzzing way that makes every shadow look sharper. He walked halfway back. "Miss, did you want a later stop?" No answer. He was close enough now to see the way her coat had dried unevenly, patches darker than others, as if she had been caught in heavy rain and warmed only slightly since he stepped beside her row and leaned down a bit. "Do you need help?" She turned her head toward him, slowly, very slowly. Her eyes did not focus on him, not really. It felt like she was looking past him, through him, toward something farther up the aisle. He followed her gaze, but the seats were empty. "I cannot stay," she whispered. "I cannot get off here." The driver tried to stay calm. "It is not safe to stay on after the last stop," he told her. "We can talk to dispatch if you need assistance." Her hands tightened on her lap, gripping the fabric of her coat as though trying to hold herself together. "I just need to wait," she said. "For him." The driver felt his throat tighten. "Who?" She did not answer. She only looked back toward the aisle, toward the darkness near the rear door, the kind that seems thicker than shadow. "Miss, I cannot continue unless you sit safely." "I am sitting safely," she murmured. "It is him who is not." The driver stepped back, unsure now, uneasier than he wanted to admit. He returned to his seat, checked the mirror, just to reassure himself. But the girl was not alone anymore. Someone sat in the row behind her, a dark shape, hooded, leaning forward slightly, as if listening to her breathe. The driver jerked in his seat. He knew that no one else had boarded. He had not stopped. He had not opened the doors. He blinked hard and checked the camera feed. Only one passenger appeared on the screen. The girl. No one in the row behind her. Mirror 2, camera 1. He felt the weight of something familiar pressing on the back of his mind, a cold knot of fear that drivers learn the hard way on Annie's road. The girl's breathing grew quick, shallow, barely contained. She is seeing him again, the driver thought, but that was not right. She was not looking at the shape. She was not afraid of it. She looked, worried for it. Please hurry, she whispered. He does not know the way. The driver's palms grew slick. He forced himself to check the mirror one more time. The hooded figure leaned forward, almost close enough to touch the girl's shoulder, but the girl did not react. As if she could not feel anything that close. The driver tried to speak, to call out, but his voice stuck in his throat. He shifted into drive, ready to take the straightaway to the park and ride as fast as he dared. But the girl suddenly stood. The movement was so abrupt that the driver flinched. "He is here," she said softly. "I have to go, miss, too late." She walked toward the front, coat brushing the seats, head bowed, steps light as breath. Then, halfway up the aisle, she turned into the doorwell. The doors were closed. He had never opened them, yet she stepped through, as if the glass and metal were nothing but another layer of fog. She vanished into the night without a sound. The driver slammed the brakes, heart punching his ribs, and threw the bus in park. He looked out the window, into the thick dark. No figure, no movement, only the quiet hum of the engine. He checked the mirror once more. The hooded figure in the seat behind hers was gone too. Nothing remained but the faint impression of weight on the middle seat. A dent in the fabric, slowly rising, slowly erasing, as if someone unseen were standing up and walking away. The driver left his job that week, after one last night of dreaming about the girl, sitting quietly in the middle seat, waiting for someone who never quite arrived on the maps we all use. This one is mine, the one I never wrote on the incident form, the one I never told anyone except the recorder in my head that will not shut off no matter how many nights pass. It started on a quiet shift, late enough that the world outside the windows felt hollowed out. A soft drizzle clung to the glass, turning every streetlight into a smear. I left the depot with an empty cabin, just the hum of the heater and the faint rattle of loose panels overhead. I remember feeling tired enough that the night wrapped around me the way exhaustion sometimes does. But Annie's road has a way of waking you up. Its darkness is different. It feels like someone else's darkness, borrowed, not meant for you. I took the familiar turns, watched the small houses fade behind the trees, and felt the bus settle into that long, lonely glide that only the after-midnight run ever has. The first odd thing was the stop request bell, a soft ding, clear, sharp, impossible to mistake, except no one was on board. I checked the mirror instinctively, knowing what I would see but looking anyway. Empty rows, still lights, nothing out of place. I brushed it off, faulty wiring, moisture in the system. Any excuse would do, until the bell chimed again. This time, the sound came not from the speaker overhead, but from somewhere deeper in the cabin, farther back, as if someone had pressed the request strip with a cold, patient hand. I slowed the bus, not enough to stop, just enough to let the engine settle and the road noise fade. That was when I heard the footsteps, light, soft, almost shy, making their way toward the front in slow, uneven taps. I gripped the wheel, my chest tightening like a fist, closing around my ribs. I looked into the mirror. No one was walking, no one was even standing, but the aisle lights flickered in a way that made it look as though something moved through them, disturbing the glow. I told myself to breathe, to stay rational, to remember that night shifts turn your senses against you if you let them. But when I glanced at the camera feed, the aisle appeared darker than it should have been, like a shape was standing just outside the frame, blocking part of the light without being fully visible. I stopped the bus, right in the center of Annie's Road, a place drivers avoid stopping for any reason at all. The drizzle turned heavier, needling the windows, hissing against the roof. I opened the front doors, just a crack, trying to ground myself in the real sound of the night. Wind, rain, the distant rumble of a passing truck far beyond the curve. Normal things, safe things. Then a voice spoke behind me, a quiet voice, close, thin as breath. You missed someone. Every muscle in my body locked. I did not turn. I could not. My hands were frozen on the wheel, fingers pressed deep into the rubber. The air behind me shifted, warm breath against the back of my neck, a soft presence leaning forward as if to see the road with me. I forced myself to look at the mirror. At first, I saw nothing, only the dim rose, the hum of old lights, the ghostly reflections of rain streaking the windshield. Then something leaned into view, a hooded silhouette right behind my seat, just barely visible, its form bending slightly, as though curious about how I would react. I swallowed hard. My throat felt full of ice. "Who are you?" I whispered. Or maybe I only thought it. My lips barely moved. The figure did not answer, but its head tilted, a slow, deliberate motion that made my skin crawl. The rain thickened outside, drumming harder, filling the silence until it was almost unbearable. The figure turned its head toward the side window, toward the steep slope where the guardrail curved out of sight. "Stop," it whispered. "Someone is waiting." I looked out through the rain. At first I saw only the trees, their branches heavy and dripping. Then I saw the shape, halfway down the slope, leaning against the trunk of a crooked tree, was a woman. Her coat darkened by rain, her hair clinging to her face, one arm wrapped around her ribs, like she was holding herself together. She raised her head just enough for our eyes to meet. She tried to stand, but stumbled. Her leg buckled. She caught herself against the tree. I fumbled for the radio, called dispatch, gave the mile mark as best I could through shaking breath. As I spoke, the woman down the slope started to slip. Her foot slid on wet mud, her hand scrabbling for something to hold. I threw the brake and ran out into the rain, the cold hitting me so hard I gasped. The slope was slick, too slick. I grabbed the rail and called out to her. She looked up, eyes wide, lips trembling through the rain. I did not think anyone would stop, she whispered. "I heard you," I said back. "I heard you on the road." She shook her head weakly. Her voice broke. I never called out. I managed to reach her, pull her up the slope, inch by inch, mud soaking my clothes, rain stabbing my face. When we reached the top, she collapsed onto the gravel, breathing hard, shivering so violently I thought she might pass out. I turned back toward the bus. The doors were open wide, and the interior lights were all off, except for the very back row, where a faint glow outlined a lone seated shape watching us in perfect stillness. I blinked through the rain. The shape did not move, did not speak, did not lean forward, just watched, patient, unblinking. When the ambulance arrived, the woman was taken away. They said she had been walking home after a car breakdown, crossed the wrong patch of mud, slipped down the slope, and sprained her leg so badly she could not climb out. They asked me how I knew she was there. I told them the truth. They did not write it down. I returned to the bus after the paramedics left. The back row was empty. No glow, no shape, only the faintest impression of weight on the seat and a few droplets of water where no one had been sitting. I finished the route without looking in the mirror again. Some nights I dream of that back row, lit just enough to show a hooded shape leaning forward, waiting for me to see who they really are. And every time I wake up before they stand, that is the only part I am grateful for.